yes to this comment about Blake and making your own system. And I'll expand on that at the end. But first, I wanted to show you my two Blake books that I think is all you need if you want to get to know Blake. So I think this one is really helpful for people who are scared about Blake, or you see these compilations where you're like, is that enough Blake? Really, I think you only need two books. This is William Blake's A Complete Illuminated Books, put out by Thames and Hudson, and it's a beautiful edition, and it is filled to the brim with really perfect reproductions of all of the illuminated poems, which is something he really engineered and created, of this idea of putting his very in-depth poetry with these beautiful, weird illustrations. He always had the fourfold vision. He saw visions from the time he was 4 onward or so. The angels and the demons were always there with him. And so you get to see that in this. And this is everything that existed, the best copy of each of them. Many of them only exist in a couple of prints. And so they scoured the libraries of the many Blake fans, who I think is a pretty lively, lovely community, to find the best copies of each of these illuminated poems and then scan them in. So what I did was read the intro of this, and I'm going through the illuminated poems, and afterwards I'm going to be going through this, which is the complete Blake, with edited by David Erdman, but commentary by Harold Bloom, who I just think is one of the smartest and most interesting people you can ever listen to. And this is nice because it's everything that he did, and it has a really great intro. It has a timeline of him, and you can skip the illuminated poems because you've already read them over here, but then you can read through everything else in here. And yes, it's a big book, but a lot of this is his letters and commentaries on him and stuff like that. You know, the Blake corpus is large, but it's also not gigantic. I'm going to get through it in this year or two. And I've certainly got through enough of it and read that last biography of him I mentioned a couple months ago to know that I don't need to figure out everything that he's talking about, like who Orcus is and who these grand characters are in his mythology, because they're constantly changing too. You know, they morph somewhat. They stand for a grand idea, but it's such a grand idea that it changes its context and how it flows into the world in different times. And so as much as I love studying the grand conceptions he comes up with in his personal mythology of deities and forces of nature, what he made me realize is I need to be doing that for myself. And so I am going through Blake and I'm stealing the ideas from him and learning from him for my own personal mythology, but he's not the end all, and he never would have wanted to be the end all. This book says, it's hard to know exactly where Blake stood politically, but basically he was against authoritarianism and imperialism. He thought that every human should be in charge of their own destiny and in charge of their own thinking. And so I think the most important lesson you can get from Blake is devour Blake, love Blake, but come up with your own system that's in-depth and beautiful and spiritual and poetic about what matters to you the most in the world, while also incorporating the darkness and the things that are hard to comprehend and seem like evil in this world. The reason he didn't like Swedenborg is because Swedenborg only talked to the angels. Blake made sure to acknowledge both, especially because he lived through the time of the French Revolution, when he got so excited, and then, that got ugly. So that's the most important thing I learned from Blake, and here are the two best books I know, and I think almost all you need to get started on Blake.